morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Our event today is called The Free World Rallies Behind Ukraine. Will it be enough? I'm joined by four fantastic experts. My name is Melinda Herring. I am the Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center here in Washington, D.C. Today, we have Andrei Zagornyuk, the former Minister of Defense of Ukraine and a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome, Andrei. I have Ambassador Oleg Shamshur, a distinguished former Ukrainian ambassador, and he served in many different places, and he's also a senior fellow at the Eurasia Center. I have Michael Bachikaru, who is in Lviv, and he is also a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a wonderful commentator. I hope you're watching him on CNN. And finally, I have our great ambassador, Sandy Vershbow. He is a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council and former U.S. ambassador to Russia and former #2 at NATO. So, gentlemen, welcome. I want to start, Michael. Can you please give us an update on where things stand in Mariupol? We're all watching these horrific scenes, and we've been hearing all sorts of really disturbing reports. Give us an update, please.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and greetings from Lviv. So, essentially, what we're seeing out in Mariupol is terrorism act by the Russian Federation. We're seeing the bombing by long-range unguided missiles is pretty much flattened, and for those of you in the United States, we can compare the size of Mariupol basically to Jersey City or Hoboken. It's pretty large. Of course, it's very strategic because it's a city, a port where a lot of the merchant marine operates in. And in fact, speaking of that, where we heard reports this morning of a handful of ships of grain being towed by Russian forces towards Russia. I don't have the exact figure in terms of death toll, but if we can put it this way of how bad things have got in terms of the lack of essential goods, food and water, at least one outlet, including BBC, is now, Financial Times, reporting that people are now having to resort to eating wild dogs to survive. Recently, there was still snow around, so people were able to melt that snow for water. But now a lot of the streams are contaminated because of corpses decaying there. Women, children, of course, as always, are the most vulnerable. We see targeting by Russian forces of non-strategic buildings, schools, art galleries, places where people are sheltering. There's absolutely no military strategic value in this, and this continues. Now, there has been attempts to evacuate people. However, the Russian Federation gave the Ukrainian government up until I think it was about 9 a.m. this morning, Moscow time, to surrender the city. The Ukrainians have refused to do so for good reason. So we're yet to see how the situation there will play out on the ground. But again, if the West needed an excuse to draw some red lines in terms of we can't tolerate this anymore, I think this would be it. In fact, I think we've seen previous red lines being crossed as well. About a week ago, the bombing of that maternity hospital in Mariupol as well, where the mother and her pregnant child died. I think also what is happening in Mariupol, this shulling into submission, if you will, is kind of going to be the playbook for other populated centers. In fact, just over the past hour or so, we've been getting reports of Odessa being hit for the first time, very strategic, of course, and also Kiev is being very badly hit as well. One last point here, in terms of, you may be wondering, what is the Russian kind of twisted thinking behind what they're doing right now? There are basically two schools of thought here. One is more psychological, of Mr. Putin getting back at Mariupol for what happened in 2014. The city was briefly taken, and then it went back to the Ukrainian side. So a lot of commentators said he's getting back at the people for that. The other important strategic aspect here is that Mariupol is very much part of that land corridor that would potentially link the Russian Federation with Crimea. And that's why, of course, we're keeping a close eye on Odessa right now as well. So a lot of factors coming together here, but I as someone who's worked so long on the humanitarian side of things for UNICEF, I've seen some pretty horrible pictures and images and situations in my life. And, this is about as bad as it gets. And the Ukrainians themselves don't have the ability to save the lives of innocent people here. They're being slaughtered to death in front of our eyes.
Michael, for those of us who want to help, what charities are getting aid to Mariupol? Is it just the International Red Cross, or are there others that are able to get food packages to Mariupol?
It's a very tricky situation in terms of provision of humanitarian aid, because supply chains are so strained right now, and because humanitarian convoys are at risk of being bombed. There had been humanitarian corridors negotiated over the past few days, but they have been frequently violated by the Russian Federation. In terms of people wanting to help, I think aside from donating, and sorry, by the way, the Red Cross is a very good one. In fact, Peter Maurer, the world's top diplomat and the head of the ICRC, was actually in Kiev a few days ago. And I will take this opportunity to say, if Peter Maurer can make it there, a lot of other Western leaders or top diplomats can make it here as well. They won't even come to Lviv if they're afraid to come here. Imagine, where it's relatively peaceful. One quick thing there, Melinda, is I think the Ukrainian diaspora, anyone who cares about what's happening in Ukraine right now, should double the pressure, the lobbying on their elected politicians for an immediate intervention. I'm not saying we should tempt the Russian side, if we can even put it that way, with a no-fly zone, but at least some sort of cover for evacuation corridors, humanitarian corridors, is what's really, really needed right now. Ukrainians cannot do that alone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, so much. Andre, it's so good to see you. Tell us, is Michael, what are you thinking in terms of the Russian strategy? Are we going to see Mariupol tactics in Kharkiv, Kiev? Is that what's next? Or do you see a different outcome? And you're muted.
It's difficult to say what we're going to see, because what we're seeing right now is the desperate attempt to show that Russia at least can win something, and that's what we're actually experiencing. So they desperately need to bring some sort of realize some sort of operational objective, because it's been already almost a month and they cannot do much, and they fail to, except like for Kherson, which wasn't like, of course it's a very serious city, and the occupied areas around the northern canal. But at the same time, we all understand that if they just hold that territory, they won't be able to hold it for long. And so that's why they want to widen the occupied area in order to establish that land bridge, and then perhaps provide some sort of explanation why this whole thing has been started. Obviously, whatever they do, the amount of atrocities and amount of civilian people died and everything is just abnormal. It's just beyond any explanation. So, what is the reason? What is the reason behind that thinking? It's difficult to explain what they're counting on. I mean, but yeah. So the strategy is to establish a land bridge between Crimea and Crimea, Kherson, and Mariupol, and essentially occupy the southern part. If they're successful with this, then they will redirect forces to the Mykolaiv, and they will try to sort of occupy the whole northern coast of the Black Sea. That would be very difficult to hold. That would be very difficult to do. Mykolaiv operation so far failed dramatically, and Mykolaiv governor announced today that they started seeding the fields, like the crops, because the campaign starts. So I don't know honestly how how wide scale that is, but at least the fact that even announced it, already shows that as a message that Mykolaiv is invasion failed dramatically. And so
I'm sorry, Andre.
I guess what's happening at the moment. Is that Russia is trying to achieve at least something, at least something which could be remotely looking as a sort of an achievement, operational achievement. That's I believe the only main reason behind their strategy right now.
Andre, I didn't catch what you said. What was the name of the campaign in Mykolaiv that the governor announced?
The governor announced that they're planting the seeds that in the agricultural fields.
Okay,
some farms started because as you know, we're missing the planting season, we're missing the seeding season, which is economically has a lot of different repercussions on Ukraine.
Well, and worldwide, it's going to affect world
And
food
worldwide,
prices.
yes.
Yeah,
And
no, it's going to
worldwide,
have a huge impact.
yeah, particularly in some countries. The biggest issue which we're facing right now is the fact that whatever is the situation with the land campaign, and they're failing, as we can discuss this further, but they did occupy the Black Sea, and they did arrange that the Black Sea is not approachable from to any of the ports of Ukraine. So for the exports of agriculture, that's a huge problem. Actually, one of the biggest at which we have, but we can discuss it later.
Is it right to say that Ukraine is winning at this point, or is it too early to say that?
Let's in different domain situations different. In the Black Sea situation is the most difficult. Black Sea and the civil, basically maritime domain situation is most difficult because we basically have lost most of pretty much all of our capabilities, and this is where things are toughest. At the same time, we still have a coast denial. They still cannot approach. As you know, there's been an approach. There's been an attempt to sort of maneuvers around the coast of the Black Sea again recently, and they sort of returned because of the artillery. In the air, they still couldn't establish what would be called the air supremacy, but they're dominating lots of areas. So of course they have a substantial advantage. But they have very substantial losses. So the documented losses are, hundreds of vessels, air vessels like planes, helicopters, and so on. So that's much more than they expected ever. But on the land, they're failing, and that's quite clear. On land, they're failing, and without the land, nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
So on the land, they and that's the reason why there's so many atrocities in the cities, because they at least try to achieve something on the land.
Andrei, can you explain briefly why are they failing? Is it the lack of resolve and the poor logistics on the Russian side, and the strong Ukrainian motivation, and the fact that you guys are on your home turf, or is there something more to it?
All factors which you mentioned, of course, make importance, but it's more than that. It's tough to explain briefly, but basically, it's first of all, it's the huge issues with command and control. It's overestimation of Russian forces by Russians. We actually warned, including in this program, including in this, that those forces which they congregated there weren't enough to occupy the whole country. Mm-hmm. There's been argument about that. Many analysts say, no, it's enough. No, it's not enough. And not enough because Ukrainian forces are much stronger than they thought. Mm-hmm. They're more skilled. Obviously, they're way more motivated, uncomparably, because we have a whole country, we have our families on our back and so on. And they don't understand the mission. That's a typical Soviet tradition. They don't understand what they're doing there. They've been explained only to get to some point, and yes, they had disruptions with logistics. Their actually state of logistics is quite bad. The state of the equipment is quite bad. General equipment and everything, but they have operational planning issues as well, because as we could see, some convoys weren't protected. Some movements were unexplainable, and so it's a whole range of factors. Basically speaking, Russian army sort of domination, supremacy, it's a high kind of a status among the armies of the world was obviously overestimated a lot. Yep. There's a lot of questions about the state of their reserve, because we do understand that originally they sent 150,000 of land troops, and that was without the Rosguardia and without some other forces. But at the same time, when they are trying to send reserves coming of a very poor quality, and we know that their land forces is 300,000. So the question is this 300,000 on paper? Because we understand that they do have reserves at home, but because they cannot send everyone into Ukraine, but who they're sending right now is clearly not something they should be proud of. So I think, honestly speaking, without a civilian control, and I believe this is without democracy, without civilian control, without an independent control, and I think these are key underlying issues. army was just rotting, and its command didn't know about that, and living in corrupt world, and basically complacent, and telling themselves how great they are.
Yeah.
But in reality, in reality, it happened to be different.
Yeah.
That's basically, honestly, this seems like a problem for all totalitarian states. Without the independent control of what military are saying when they are reporting for the achievements, it seems like it's just no one knows what happens inside. It was a closed world reporting directly just to Putin, who obviously had a personal close connections and still has to these top commanders. And that's it. And it's a world within itself, which was just not delivering what it was saying it was delivering.
Thanks a lot,
Knowing a little post-Soviet military psychology, which it seems to be the very probable explanation, like a basis explanation, like a sort of underlying explanation.
Yeah. I keep saying that we overestimated the strength of the Russian military and underestimated the strength of the Ukrainian forces.
Sure.
And I think that's the best summary. Ambassador, I want to bring you into this conversation. Everyone wants to know, how do we get out of it? So the Ukrainian side, there are negotiations underway. I'm going to start with Ambassador Shamshur and then Ambassador Vershba. So there are negotiations underway, and several world leaders want to be in charge of negotiations. Erdogan has tried, Macron has tried, and the Israelis are involved now. It looks like the Israeli negotiations are moving forward, or the most probable at this point. And it looks like Zelensky has signaled that he's willing to consider NATO neutrality. But the sticking points are Crimea and the status of the Donbass. Ambassador Shamshur, I know it's going to take a couple of weeks to see sort of the outline of what a deal would look like, but what are your expectations? Are we getting close? Is Putin willing to negotiate, I guess, is the first question. And what would a potential deal look like?
I would say that it's one of the most difficult questions to answer. And I think that information is really scarce to draw any conclusions. Well, basically, I think that the conduct of negotiations, possible deal, will depend on two things. So basically, that's the efficiency of the Ukrainian armed forces and resilience of the Ukrainian people, and the dramatic increase of the assistance from the West. So far, the West, to me, reminds a bit the spectators at the horror show that are looking at the horrors of the war, saying it's incredible, it's awful, and at the same time doing only the almost minimal service. It's quite clear that without, if not the no-fly zone, without the beef up of the Ukrainian air defense with the most advanced systems, without the increase in the ammunition supply and other things, we cannot really defeat Russia, even taking into consideration the poor logistics, poor conditions, morale, and so on and so forth. And the bargaining position of Ukraine should be to get, acceptable deal will depend on, as I said, on the efficiency of the Ukrainian military, and also on the resolve on the part of the West to do more. Because if it is not being done now, it would have been done later, because the success in Ukraine would only increase dramatically appetites and recklessness of Russia. As far as the possible contents of the deal is concerned, it's also a difficult question. Speaking about neutrality, you cannot speak about neutrality without guarantees. But those guarantees, well, here we are hitting against the wall, at least on two issues. So firstly, as Minister Kuleba said, we are speaking about sure, hard guarantees. But speaking about hard guarantees, those are the guarantees that should be dissuasive enough and that should involve the protection of Ukraine by military means, which is not happening right now. Secondly, the list of the guarantors. Definitely it should include Russia, but is there any confidence as far as Russia is concerned? The answer is obvious, no. And there is only one, maybe two countries that could provide guarantees without Russia. Speaking about them, the Great Britain and basically I think the only one really is the United States. But as soon as we're hearing about the United States, that there is no question that there would be American forces in Ukraine now, even looking at the horrors of Mariupol and other cities. I was sure that there would be more willingness later. So those are two difficult questions. The second set of questions is definitely this deal cannot provide the beachhead for future incursions, invasions of Russia against Ukraine. That's also a difficult question. So basically, I think that the gist of the matter is to create the most favorable bargaining position for Ukraine. And this can be done only by beefing up and maybe even the change in the paradigm of military assistance on the part of the United States. As far as, and the West in general, as far as the intentions of Putin are concerned, that would also depend on the situation on the ground. If he perceived the situation as favorable and as giving him more ground to press on Ukraine, to put forward ultimatums, Putin will do exactly that. So those two things are intertwined. Limiting capacity of Putin to put forward ultimatums to intimidate Ukrainians would also increase the bargaining positions of Ukraine. And I would like to maybe to finish my comment by saying that so far we are allowing, in a way, Putin to intimidate us. I mean us, Ukraine and the West, and to propagate fear. The issue that should be resolved: how to make sure that Putin has fear, not us, and how we can actually apply sanctions. That's also a very important question. Not the sanctions that would act in a while, but the sanctions that would act immediately, that would really destroy Russian economy, and not thinking about trying to maybe to devise consequences, so on and so forth. The situation on the ground is very simple. Civilians are dying. People are being killed. We should stop that immediately. There is no time for any further procrastination, neither moral nor even practical for military purposes for NATO and the West in general. That's
Ambassador Shamshir, I'm with you. And I was not very happy with the Biden administration last week, but my view changed on them after the new round of defense assistance came out. They're sending a lot of good systems. What do you think?
So, so we are grateful for any military assistance, but there should be a qualitative leap. So we should not be speaking only about assistance in javelins and something like that. The most important question, I'm not a military expert, but as far as I understand, is to close the skies. And you can close the skies without no-fly zone only by providing the most developed, top-notch anti-aircraft, anti-missile assistance. And we should be, even if providing C-300 is a problem, even if providing Su and mixed jets is a problem. So we cannot understand that. And people I'm talking, I'm Ukrainians I'm talking to, they do not understand that. But I will be speaking, I will be even more ambitious. We should be speaking about the Patriot like systems. That would make a difference. So far, assistance is important. It's important for us to fight the Russians, but it's still, in my opinion, it's still not a game changer.
Yeah.
That's
okay. Got it. Thank you so much. Ambassador Vershbow, thank you so much for your patience. Is Putin ready to negotiate? And can you see the outlines of a deal at this point?
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Shamshur gave a very comprehensive answer, and I agree with what he said. I think there are a lot of good reasons to doubt that Putin is ready to negotiate seriously on an agreement at this time, at least. Although many other Russian spokesmen have spoken optimistically about the progress of the negotiations, and they've even leaked some of the provisions that could form the basis of a compromise deal. Putin is conspicuously silent on this subject, and he clearly remains very defiant every time he gets in front of a microphone. He continues to speak of Ukrainian genocide and a denazification of Ukraine. So I remain to be convinced that he's at all interested in negotiation, and that these negotiations that have taken place are just a effort to deflect criticism and buy time. And Putin may actually hope that the stalled military offensive may somehow regain momentum, and that he'll be able to force Zelensky to sue for peace on Russian terms. So I fully agree with Ambassador Shamshur that what is absolutely essential right now is that NATO, the US, all other countries that want to see a free Ukraine ramp up very quickly on an accelerated basis the military assistance. We have to do everything possible to drive up the costs to Russia for its aggression, to roll back at least some of their territorial gains to show that they don't have momentum, maintain the pressure of sanctions, and of course we have to keep the Ukrainians in the fight. That's not automatic. So some of the capabilities that the Biden administration promised last week are what the doctor ordered, but they're not getting delivered fast enough. Particularly air defense, surface-to-air missiles, which can help Ukraine close the skies if a no-fly zone is still a bridge too far. And I think the administration made a mistake in ruling out the transfer of the MiG-29s from Poland. There has to be a way to do that, maybe by delivering them over land. I don't want to know the details. They should just get it done so that the Ukrainian pilots can fly these things and at least degrade some of the Russian air capabilities that are continuing to wreak havoc and death and destruction on the Ukrainian people. In terms of what a deal might look like, if we fulfill the task of convincing Putin that time is not working in his favor, which I think he still does, and he does get more serious about negotiations, it looks like from all the indicators from the parties themselves and from would-be mediators that the essential deal is for Ukraine, grudgingly but voluntarily, to accept a form of neutral status, which would mean giving up on its ambitions for NATO membership. But I think we have leverage to help Ukraine in these negotiations, in particular, how we calibrate sanctions and how we answer the very legitimate appeal that we heard again from Ambassador Shamshur for security guarantees that aren't just a repeat of the hollow ones that came with the Budapest Memorandum, but guarantees that either or both allow Ukraine to maintain real military capabilities to deter Russian violation and re-invasion for the third time, and at the same time, there's the sanctions go with the military pressure. But I don't know who's going to step up and agree to the kinds of really robust security guarantees. Ukraine legitimately asked for something that would have the functional effect of a NATO Article 5 guarantee, even if we're provided on a bilateral basis or through a smaller coalition of the willing. But are any governments, including the US government, prepared to do anything remotely close to a real security guarantee? Short of that, there may be other options, peacekeeping forces that could be robust enough to deter the Russians from attacking, but they would be far less meaningful than a real security guarantee. And of course, then there's a lot of other issues. We can talk about it later. The will come up. It's not going to be as easy as Dmitry Peskov seemed to imply. I mean, neutrality in return for full withdrawal, full cessation of all hostilities raises questions of full withdrawal from what? Will it include territories occupied in the south around Mariupol and the land bridge to Crimea, additional parts of Donbass? How greedy are the Russians going to be when it comes to the details? Because legitimately, they shouldn't keep any of the territory they've taken by force. And the West should at least maintain that that's the starting point, and that Ukraine is legitimately going to set a return to the status quo before the 24th of February as the proper baseline for any deal in which Ukraine has to accept a neutral status. But recognition of Crimea as part of Russia, that's going to be a bitter pill, which also would be illegitimate, but Ukraine's going to have to make some tough decisions in these negotiations. But the key is that they should emerge as a genuine sovereign state with the rights of a sovereign state to have an army to defend itself. And Ukraine should also have the right to continue to have relations with other countries, with NATO, with the EU, and even better, the EU should accelerate membership so that at least some of the principles of the rules-based international order are upheld. Not easy, but that's where we should be proceeding from.
Thank you so much, Sandy. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a minute, and you can pivot to a different subject. But how is NATO doing? If you were going to assess their response, would you give them a B+ or would you give them a better grade? And what should they be doing that they're not doing?
Well, I would give them a pretty high grade, maybe a B+ or an A-, in the sense that first of all, as we've seen with the 180-degree shift in German outlook on the Russian threat and on defense requirements, NATO is getting very serious about defense capabilities for the alliance, deterring Russian aggression against NATO. And I think the allies have responded well, if a little belatedly, to US appeals that they participate in the arming and training of Ukrainian armed forces. So I think NATO has got the right strategy in terms of deterring further gains by the Russians through the military assistance, while making sure that Putin doesn't challenge Article 5 and cross the border and attack NATO territory. But NATO has, I think, longer-term challenges to figure out how are we going to manage and contain a revisionist, revanchist Russia for many years to come. We can't just achieve some kind of stable modus vivendi or predictable and stable relations, as the Biden administration wisely doesn't talk about anymore. But containing a revanchist power that continues to be ready to flout international law and use force to establish facts on the ground that go against all the principles we stand for.
Great, thank you so much. So let's switch to Q&A from our audience. We have a number of questions, and you four gentlemen can unmute yourselves and try to give short answers, because we got lots of great questions. So here we go. If you haven't submitted your question, please do so now in the chat or on Twitter. So first question, Sandy, is for you, and it's from DC US correspondent from Georgia. And she says, the Moldovan president called on Russia to withdraw from Transnistria. Do you think that the Georgian government should be following similar strategies with Russian occupied regions of the country? Is there an opportunity for Georgia to resolve these fundamental issues with its territorial integrity now?
Well, both Moldova and Georgia certainly have legitimate grievances against Russia, and have long demanded that Russia withdraw its illegally deployed forces from their territory. But I have to say, honestly, I'm not sure that now is the time to expect Russia to show any flexibility on these issues after so many years of intransigence. And when it is still trying to demonstrate, as Andrei Zagornyuk said, that it is not losing in Ukraine. If any flexibility on Georgia and Moldova right now could be seen by Russian audiences as a wavering of Russian resolve. So this may be the wrong time. You ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer if you ask it right now.
Okay, timing is everything. Michael, could you please give us the most accurate number on the number of refugees, Ukrainian refugees who've gone to the European Union, and the number of internally displaced people, if you have it?
Yeah, so the numbers we're hearing right now are in the million range of crossed over to.
Michael, I think
we're now. Can you
yeah,
hear me?
You're having some trouble with the internet. Try again.
Yeah, okay, so the numbers we're hearing right now is about 5 million of those who have crossed over the border into, especially countries like Poland. But it now looks like, because of the bombing that we talked about of cities like Mariupol, possibly Odessa, Kiev, that we're looking at that upper number of 10 million people, which would represent about a quarter of the Ukrainian population. I mean, that's just mind-boggling, that type of number. So I think this is a really important point to make, is the other role our Western allies of Ukraine can play right now, Canada, US, is to relieve some of that pressure of asylum seekers coming into Poland and elsewhere and taking them to their countries. That has to happen right now, not in a few weeks from now. So that's a really important point. I'm going to have to sign off in a sec because I have to teleport myself to the Central Time Zone for a breakfast show. But I wanted to make one very, very quick point, because in your notes to me, you mentioned something about whether, these types of what we're seeing the Russians do right now, whether these are considered war crimes. Absolutely, yes. I just checked with the ICRC, and what's happening in Mariupol right now, denying essential services, life services like water, and also agriculture, is a grave violation in international humanitarian law. One more quick point, Melinda. I think it was Ambassador Shamshir who mentioned or the previous speaker, about the agricultural planting season coming up. That's going to be really, really crucial, because denying access to fields is also an IHL violation. But the other thing that will likely happen, given what we've seen happen in the Donbass, is the Russians are going to mine agricultural areas. And that will make, as we've seen in other parts of the world where conflicts have taken place, very, very difficult to conduct agriculture. I need not remind you that just a couple of years ago, or maybe it was 3 years ago, UNICEF designated that front line of the Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk as one of the most mined areas of the world. So can you imagine what we're going to see now? So I hope that's helpful.
It's super helpful. Michael, before you go, one last question. What can be done in terms of international law to either designate Putin as a war criminal? What can be done in the different international forums?
Well, one of the things that's, of course, most important is documentation. And in fact, the Ukrainians have done something very smart and started that process. But also, the work that journalists are doing is very, very crucial to using this as evidence in future trials. But, it's very, very difficult, of course, in the fog and in the depth of war to create a structure where all of these things are documented. So I think that's where Western assistance can also come in. It's going to be really, really important. We have to reach a point where Putin and his cronies and those oligarchs will not be able to step outside of the territory of Russia, or Russian-controlled territory, without being arrested, without being persona non grata. This should have actually happened quite some time ago.
Thanks so much, Michael. And when you need to roll, feel free. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Really appreciate your perspective. Andrei Zag, is it too late to do anything to improve Ukraine's naval situation? This seems to be Ukraine's biggest weakness. What are your thoughts on that? And you're muted, Andrei.
Sorry. Yeah, it's the toughest question and toughest, situation there, because we have been talking to our allies for a while about creating mosquito fleets, about creating all these kinds of systems and so on. We've been discussing with NATO. And here, with all due respect, I do disagree a bit with the mark given to NATO, with because NATO failed consistently to address Black Sea situation over and over again. And I personally was involved in some of those discussions back in 2019. I was like, we were saying, guys, let's come up with some plan. And there's been conferences, endless conferences of NATO on the Black Sea, endless seminars, and people were like saying all right words. but essentially nothing has been done. And when the conflict started, NATO failed to deliver any help. Like when I'm saying NATO, I don't mean the alliance as a whole. I mean the headquarters in Brussels. They couldn't say anything really. They couldn't bring any of the solutions and so on. So the only thing which was actually quite bold and helped a lot was the fact that like Turkey closed the Bosphorus and essentially that precluded some additional capabilities from Russia to come to the Black Sea. But no, at the moment, the first thing what we need to do is we need to sort situation on the ground and enhance the coastal protection, because what we need to make sure is that these big landing assault ships can actually come to the Ukrainian shores and bring the Marines to the ground to reinforce their ground troops. Actually, interestingly, we had some very serious problems with morale among Marines, and we do know that in Sevastopol there were a number of cases when they refused to board the ships, and their explanation was mainly because they were told that they're fighting against LNR-DNR, and they were sent to Odessa, and Odessa is obviously not in LNR-DNR, but that was an explanation. The real reason, they were scared that the coastal artillery will simply not allow the ships to actually get even close to the shore, which was true, and so they have some issues there as well. But the capabilities of Ukraine, as you know, they're not there, and so what we can do at the moment is just make sure at least that the coast is protected.
Thanks so much.
At this point of time.
Ambassador Shamshur, Jack wants to know, is Moldova a model for the final status of Ukraine? Constitutional neutrality not in NATO?
Before answering this question, I would like to make 2 points on the previous ones. As far as the war crimes and the crimes against humanity are concerned, it's extremely important to introduce into the picture, into the process, as soon as possible, the international courts, of the United Nations, and the procurator of the Hague Criminal Court has already instituted the procedure, and the decision was taken by the UN court. It's extremely important to amass the evidence and to take action. And speaking about international organizations, I cannot say say about my frustration about the action of the International Atomic Agency, which is actually doing nothing to safeguard situation in the Ukrainian power plants that are being controlled by the Russians. I think it's really very frustrating and in a way even despicable. Speaking about NATO, I think that one point, and speaking about the West reaction before and during the conflict, it's in a way Obama-esque. So they are saying Putin and the Russian what they wouldn't do, and for Putin it's enough to understand what he can do. Actually, that is very important. And I've forgotten the questions. The question you posed. Could you remind me the question?
Yeah, sure.
We are the countries of different size, of different, if you wish, ambitions. And I think that we will try to find, and we will, I am quite sure, find our own way to maybe find some kind of compromise solution, but at the same time keep our eyes set on our strategic goals. So I think it will be Ukrainian way.
Super, thank you. Hey, Sandy, Tom wants to know, he says, everyone on this panel thinks that the decision 2 weeks ago on MiGs, on the Polish jets, there's about 30 of them, to move them from Poland to Ukraine was a total mistake. And the Biden administration is blocking that decision. But he said, could you please explain the Biden position? Because I don't understand it. I know you disagree with it, but could you at least explain it?
Well, as stated, and that it's not totally coherent is one of the problems in understanding the Biden administration's approach. But what they're saying is that for NATO planes flown by NATO country pilots to cross the border into Ukrainian airspace, even just to deliver these planes to Ukrainian partners, would be tantamount to entering the war. And so that for that reason, they see it as too escalatory. But that doesn't explain why it's okay to send hundreds or thousands of Stinger missiles and javelins that directly kill Russians. Their whole purpose is to do that, to destroy Russian equipment. Why that is not somehow just as escalatory. So I hope this can be redebated in some way could be found, because I think it is surprising, but the Russians do not have control of this of the airspace. They have not achieved air superiority despite almost a month of hostilities. And the Ukrainian pilots are very skilled, and they've taken out some Russian planes. So while they may ultimately be inferior to what the Russians can bring to the fight, these MiG-29s are 3 decades old. They still could make a difference in raising the cost of the Russians and improving Ukraine's position going into negotiations.
Sandy, question
yeah,
for you. So Biden is on his way to Poland right now. Do you think that this issue is still a live one? Do you think that Biden may reconsider it?
At the moment, I'm not optimistic about that. I think, and I agree with the point made by Ambassador Shah. I'm sure that it hasn't helped that at so many key junctures we've been explicit in what we won't do, rather than preserving a little bit of ambiguity in the Russians' minds that could improve deterrence. And you can't bluff your way through these things, but ruling out so many different options, I think, has given Putin a false sense that he's kind of the one who can control events. We're self-deterring ourselves more than we're deterring Putin. Yeah. And P.S. I accept the downgrading of NATO's overall grade by Andriy. I was thinking more of the immediate conflict, but certainly there's a lot of mistakes that were made over the years and in the months preceding the actual outbreak of war, including stronger capacities for NATO in the Black Sea and more accelerated assistance to Ukraine and developing more naval capabilities that might have been able to survive at least part of the way through the conflict.
Great, thank you. Hey, Andrei, I see your hand. I want to ask you one question and then jump in. What happens if the 30,000 Russian troops in Belarus get in the game? Does that change things massively on the ground?
Belarus is a very, very complex and question, because, of course, the whole Belarusian society, including their military, hate that idea. They don't want to participate, and they're doing whatever they can openly and behind the scenes, in order to avoid that situation. If they are sent, they would be very demotivated, because the whole Belarus society is already, and Belarus civil society and Russian civil society totally different. So we need to understand that, and they are discussing this in their chats and their social media, in the calls to each other. There's lots of movement that they should not participate, and they hate that idea. I don't think they will be motivated. I don't think they will be doing much. And I think in the case if they get in, which would be a biggest mistake Lukashenko can make in his life, of all mistakes he made in his life before, I think that they would quickly withdraw. But Lukashenko knows all that because his own generals are telling him that. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to create an image of kind of a getting ready for Putin, because that's the only reason he's doing that, is because Putin tells him to. But at the same time, I think he's trying to avoid that, and he's kind of trying to sit on 2 chairs at the same time. So today, for example, they moved the airborne division back to the original location, to Brest, from the border, from Ukrainian border. I don't know if that could be because they got tired and they will move some other people in, or there could be a maneuver, or that could be another. And also the statements of Ministry of Defense of Belarus, who we read every day, they're saying that no, we're not going to do that. That was American provocation, so it's actually your provocation, guys. But just if you didn't know. But so essentially this is very tough. And even if they move in, I don't think they would be doing much difference, because they just don't want to fight. I have no idea why they should do that, and so on. But let me tell you something else. We had approached NATO straight after the invasion, so after 24th, and NATO was not only discussing a non-fly zone, which, honestly speaking, I think that they shouldn't have been discussing if they knew it's not going to be passed, because the way they presented it, was quite bad. Stoltenberg just made a press conference and he said, "Oh, by the way, we also discussed non-SLAZN, and of course it was a no." So why, in the time when the country, which is an enhanced opportunity partner, by the way, is asking for help to make such a statement and not offering any alternative whatsoever? And the only thing they proposed during that day was ridiculously 50,000 tons of fuel. And I know that because I'm currently also an advisor to the Vice Prime Minister of Euro-Atlantic integration. And you know, it's just like they did nothing. So the headquarters, and how many trips Stoltenberg made to Paris to convince Macron to do some more and to do more sanctions? I don't think they did. How many trips he made to Germany to convince? Why German companies are still working with Russians? You know, a lot of German companies are still working with Russia, and so on and so on. So the question is like, yes, I understand that they're enhancing the NATO perimeter, no question about that. However, I don't see much movement on that either, but that's not my problem, you know, at the moment. But what I do see is that, well, it's like saying, you know, we're going to keep our house safe when you see a crime on the street. Well, you cannot say that your house is safe if on your street, yeah, it's not in a house, no problem. Your house may be safe, but if you see that there are people killed on your street, that you're not living in a safe environment. And if alliance is pretending to be a key element of of European security architecture, well, it fails to be that key element because European architecture is just destroyed as we speak. And things are horrible happening in Ukraine right now, which some other speakers mentioned, but it's just a fraction. And NATO is just sending their concerns at 50,000 tons of fuel. I mean, and again, when I'm saying NATO, I'm saying headquarters. Huge respect to the United States, what they're doing right now. Huge respect to Britain, and so on. So no question about that. But I'm talking about headquarters. I don't think they're doing their job whatsoever. But okay, that's maybe my personal opinion, of course.
No, I love it. That was a great intervention. We have 2 minutes remaining, 1 minute remaining. Ambassador and Ambassador, I'm going to give you guys the last word. So 3 questions for you. Will Putin use nukes? Will he use chemical weapons? Actually, let's just boil it down to those 2 questions. Sandy, you want to go first?
Okay, well, first of all, I understand what Andrei just said, but what happens in NATO headquarters is ultimately the result of policy decisions by the member states. They don't have a independent role. So you're being maybe unfairly kind to the Biden administration and unfairly harsh on NATO headquarters. They both need to get up their game if we're going to help Ukraine turn the tide to the degree that a decent political settlement can be negotiated. Nuclear weapons and chemical weapons. I think it's unlikely that Putin will use them, but I don't think it's inconceivable, particularly on chemical weapons, where we've seen in Syria that Putin has either approved or acquiesced in the Syrian use of chemical weapons, chlorine gas in particular, against opposition forces to devastating effect. And if he feels that that would be what's needed to crush the will of Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian people, he might do it. So we have to do what we can to deter that. He's already laying the groundwork with these bogus propaganda stories about the bio labs that were set up with Russian cooperation as part of the cooperative threat reduction program. It had nothing to do with bioweapons, but this could be the pretext for Putin to use chemical. Nuclear, I'm less concerned, but not completely unconcerned. If the war begins to go badly for Russia, it's possible Putin might conduct a demonstration strike of some kind just to show that he's ready to out-escalate NATO and the West. We better be ready for that, make clear that he can't achieve so-called escalation dominance, making sure that our nuclear posture and our readiness is at the highest level without, without being provocative, but show the Russians that they will not gain from first use of nuclear weapons.
Super. Thank you, Sandy. Oleg, any thoughts, any disagreements with Sandy?
Well, actually, I agree with Ambassador Versbal, and I would like only to say that we are dealing with the guy who might be really deeply sick, and we are dealing with dictator, and we are dealing with master making unthinkable thinkable. and his inability or his fear to use chemical and especially, and also, not especially, but also nuclear weapon would depend on our, I mean, Ukrainian and especially West's ability to make him be fearful of consequences, not serious consequences, but real consequences.
Super. Thank you so much. I have one last comment from Bishop Guziak in Philadelphia. He says, I thank you for the years of devoted service that stand behind this most informative discussion. Thank you so much for that comment. He said, can you please offer some thoughts about what committed U.S. citizens can and should be doing now to contribute to an end of this invasion and to aid the innocent victims? I'm going to take that question. So here's 3 things you can do. First, pray. Number 2, open your wallet and give to Razom, R-A-Z-O-M. It's a 501c3 charity based in New York City, and they are sending medical supplies to Ukraine. Your money will not be wasted. I personally give there, and I'm raising money for them. I trust them, and they are a good organization. Number 3, call the White House and your member of Congress and tell them to keep sending the military assistance to Ukraine. And number 4, actually, there's 4 things. Start telling your friends and family about what's going on. Tell them about what's happening in Mariupol, and start organizing little fundraisers in your community. Thank you for everything you're doing. God bless America and God bless Ukraine. Thank you for joining us.